Welcome. I am Fernanda Paiva, Hitchhiking Stars, and today we're going to be talking about Uranus. So what is Uranus about? What are the cycles? So we can then understand how Uranus might be affecting us, or what kind of opportunities transiting Uranus will be representing in the houses based on our ascendants, right? So don't worry, there will be timestamps everywhere, but I can't do things halfway, half measure. So I need to go a little bit deeper into what are the meanings of Uranus and how to look at Uranus astrologically as well. So you can then do your own interpretation as well as my tips that I'm giving towards the end of the video when I'm talking about Uranus in the houses. All right. So this video will have 5 parts. The first one will be about discovery and cycles of Uranus. The second one will be a little bit about the myth. So don't worry, I won't go too much in it. Then we're going to look into my mind map and what are the potential Uranus, astrological Uranus significators that we have, and how to think, how to interpret Uranus astrologically. And then we're going to go into Uranus and Taurus as well, and how we can make that mixture potentially. And then the 5th part, we'll look into Uranus in the houses based on your ascendant. So we're going to do that journey today in the video, remembering that this is constructive astrology. So we're not really looking into all the bads and the horribles and everything. We're looking into what are the potentials, the constructive potentials for you to create the life that you want to live. So this is where I'm really focusing in all of my videos, and this won't be different. So also, just a little, just to let you know again, for the passionate people about astrology looking for new sources, new books, new things to learn, I'm using a lot of, again, Sue Tompkins, the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook, for, getting some insights and etc. And I'm also using Planetary Aspects from Conflict to Cooperation from Tracy Marks. That's a great book as well. Tracy Marks has a bunch of really good books as well. So just to get some inspiration into all the information that I'm sharing here with you. So I hope I can deliver a lot of value for you. This is what I'm interested in. All right, so let's make a move into the discovery. So again, like I was telling you in previous videos, if you have seen it before, whenever a planet is discovered, there is a kind of a resonance with what that planet means astrologically in what's happening around, what's happening in society and human history, etc. So apparently, and again, you're going to see me looking into my notes because I have a couple of little notes to keep the video going smooth, okay? So Uranus was discovered accidentally in 1781. So apparently it was on 13th of March. And what was going on around that time? I mean, if you have a little bit of a historical awareness, you're going to think about French Revolution, right? Straight away, like 1789. So there was a French Revolution just lurking in, just kind of about to happen. We had also America's independence around that time, and the Industrial Revolution as well, which was beginning 1760 and going all the way until 1840 as well. So there's some really big historical happenings there. And I think what they have in common, and what they have in common with Uranus especially, is a kind of a shocking event. It's something that really changed, right, the dynamics of what was going on. I mean, the Industrial Revolution definitely has changed values and how people do things, how people suddenly, there was a lot of people moving to the cities again and working in industries and etc. And with the French Revolution taking the king down and chopping their heads off and everything, I think that's one of the biggest sort of significators that we have of Uranus being discovered is the French Revolution. So not only that in terms of history, but when Uranus was discovered, electricity was also discovered. And shock is a word that we usually use very much, or we associate very much with Uranus. Someone says something shocking, someone does something shocking. A person that tends to shock other people are usually very Uranian, we would call it. So a very prominent Uranus in their natal chart. So electricity was discovered just before Uranus was discovered accidentally, right? So this is more or less the scenario of when Uranus was discovered. Now, in terms of the cycles of Uranus, and this is important to keep track and to see the bigger picture of what a planet means, because I see a lot of people learning astrology and getting very excited about having Pluto in a sign, or Uranus in a sign, or Neptune in a sign, and you have to think that these planets move very, very slowly. So the sign itself won't necessarily be giving you a lot of characteristics in terms of your personality and your tendencies, unless that planet is on your ascendant or is very, very tightly conjoined or aspected to any of your personal planets. Okay, so the cycle of Uranus will take 84 years to go around. So when you're 84 years of age, you have your Uranus return. Okay, and it stays roughly 7 years each sign. So we're going to have Uranus around 7 years in each sign. We have Uranus in Taurus since 2018. So Uranus is coming back and forth, Aries, Taurus, but it started, traveling through Taurus around in 2018, and it will be there until 2026. So we still have about 3 years to go. Okay. So this is, the retrogradation as well. Actually, that's what I wanted to mention with the cycles as well. And so Uranus goes retrograde once a year for about 5 months. That's very similar to what happens to Pluto as well, which I shared in the last video. So for 5 months, we have Pluto going retrograde, and we can rethink the things that are associated with Uranus, thinking about where Uranus is in our natal charts, as well as where Uranus is transiting. So Uranus right now is transiting somewhere in your chart that you're going to find out towards the end of the video. But also the natal Uranus will have a lot to say in terms of what do you personally understand of that? Where are you used to experience Uranus in your life? It will be very much placed based on the placement of the natal placement of Uranus. So this is what I wanted to share about the discovery and the cycles as well. Now, moving on to the myth, and I think thinking about the Greek myths connected to the planets are also very, very useful, because we can see patterns and ideas connected with how we interpret that planet astrologically as well. So Uranus relates to the father sky, so Uranus. And so they say in the beginning was chaos, and then we had Gaia, and then Gaia gave birth to the night and to the sky as well. And Uranus is the father sky that she gives birth to. And then they mate and they become mates. It's a funny thing with the Greek myths, right? But they become mate and start having children, because Gaia is obviously very fertile, is the earth, itself. And so they start having children, but their children were monsters. So they had Cyclops, those monsters with just one eye in the forehead. They had Titans as well, which are, Zeus and Poseidon or Neptune, and Pluto as well is one of the Titans. And they had these creatures as well called Centimanes, which had 50 heads and 100 arms each. Now, the interesting bit with the story and the myth is that Uranus, or Father Sky, was horrified with his children. He didn't like his children a bit, so he just kept pushing it back into Gaia's womb. He's just rejecting his own children. And so Gaia, in some of the myths, Gaia was tired of not having her children, but in other myths she was in pain, like just in pain for having all of them being pushed back into her womb. So she asked for help to her children inside her, I guess. She asked for help and see who would help her in the situation. And so the only of her of her children that decides to help her is Cronus, which is Saturn. And that's where the story gets very interesting as well. Now, one thing that I found very insightful when I was researching about Uranus, and I was reading a lot of things about Uranus, was when I read one of the lectures by Liz Green, and I think is Stilling Fire from the Gods, became a book, right? And I highly recommend as well. And she says, we kind of tend to judge Uranus for pushing the kids back into the womb, but the kids were monstrous. Like that, would you like to have 100 arms and 50 heads kid? Like, how would you feel if that came out of you? So So that was an interesting twist of perspective with the whole myth, that I found it was enlightening as well to think from that perspective as well. But the idea I think that resonates very much with Uranus is a sense of rejection of earthiness as well that we have here, with the children coming out and him rejecting the children and pushing them all back, because obviously the 50 heads, 100 arms, we can think about how monstrous they looked, but the Titans didn't, and he's still pushing them all back. So there's something valuable to think about when we think about Uranus here, which is a sense of rejection of the earthiness, because the earthy side is imperfect. And we'll get a little bit more into that when we look into the mind map about Uranus. But keep this idea in your mind there a little bit, like the imperfection of humanity. And I've seen many of my Aquarian friends, for example, resent having a body. And Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, so it has a kind of a resonance with Aquarius. And they say that's horrible because I have to go in the bathroom, I have to do things that are just too animal-like. And, I'd rather just be working with these concepts and thinking about the bigger ideas, right? So there's something about that in this pushing the children back into the womb. Okay, so Gaia asks for help. Cronus says yes. She gives him the sickle, right? That agricultural thing that we see connected with Saturn, and he uses it. So Saturn uses that to castrate Uranus. So when they're gonna lay it together, Saturn comes about and just castrates Uranus. So from the blood came the Furies, which is another thing that I thought was I was just a little curious to mention there, because there are so many different connections in mythology, and I find that Greek mythology speaks to me particularly. I really, really love it. I've been reading a book about the goddesses in the female psyche, and reading about Hestia and about Hera and Juno, and I really want to use that to talk about the asteroids. So you wait and see. I'll definitely do a video about the asteroids for sure. Finding very, very insightful to look into the myth and think about that in astrology, which is basically what I'm inviting you to do here with the mythology of Uranus. And the idea of Saturn castrating Uranus is a very good one as well, that we talk about a lot in the astrological community when we think about both. And obviously the fact that Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. So we have the modern ruler of Aquarius and the traditional, in a kind of a cross-purpose, Saturn, the traditional, castrating the modern ruler there as well. And what comes out of that is the goddess of revenge. There's this sort of, there is the anger that comes out of these. And in fact, this can also be talking about the battle of the generations that we think about, and how, and this is in one of the subjects in the mind map, actually, and we're sort of swiftly moving into the mind map. But this idea of everything that was once Uranian and liberating and new and cutting edge becomes Saturnian, becomes institutionalized and the norm and taken for granted, and so the relationship between Saturn and Uranus is a very interesting one to look into and to think about the dynamics and to think about the castration as well, and Saturn trying to keep control as well, right? So if you're not sure about Saturn as a principle, this is a video I did about Saturn and it'll be worth having a look. But Saturn tries to control as well, right? Novelty or new ideas or anything that can be threatening, because it's done to its own dad as well, right? So Saturn starts swallowing its children as well later on. There's some kind of like really freaky but a great imagery for us to have and to think and apply to natal charts, to astrological charts in general. All right, so let's have a look at the mind map now. So one of the aspects of the mind map here connected with Uranus, as I said, is the relationship between Uranus and Saturn, and how there is a dynamic, there is a really powerful dynamic between these two principles. All right, so Uranus, according to Liz Green, and I love that definition. So Uranus stands for the collective mind. So if Pluto is the collective will to survive, Uranus is the collective mind. It has to do with mind, with ideas, with reason, with logic. It doesn't have anything to do with emotions, with, and she also claims, I mean, in astrology, we tend to say that someone that has a powerful Uranus is very individual and unique. But actually, there's nothing individual and unique about Uranus, because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, is not the ruler of Leo. So when we think about uniqueness, we think about the sun and we think about Leo. So Uranus is more connected with trends. And someone that has a very powerful Uranus in their chart, they might be very different, but that's because they're tapping into collective ideas that people they still haven't figured out. Excuse me. So it has to do more with inventions, discoveries, technology, progress, something that is cutting edge, rather than an individual being an individual. And I kind of, I was wrestling with this idea for a while, because I happen to have a strong Uranus in my chart. And I've always associated, especially when I started learning astrology and I read all the things about Uranus, and I felt super proud of it. And so it was really hard for me to read that as there's nothing individual about Uranus. But it does make sense. It's more about being cutting edge and being different and being the outcast. You don't belong, really, and you don't actually want to belong. That's another thing that's connected with Uranus. But let's go point by point, so we keep this organized and Mercury and Virgo friendly. So the collective mind, new ideas breaking into societies represented by Uranus, and especially Uranus in the sign, right? Because that sign will be talking about the realm where all of these new ideas collectively are coming up. So inventions, discoveries, technology, progress. In fact, I think when the internet became big, we had Uranus in Aquarius. We had Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius, I think. So there's no sense of ethics or emotions attached to it. And this is when we really need Leo and the sun to moderate this, to be like, okay, hold on, I had this great idea, but is that applicable? And am I going to be hurting somebody in the process? How is that going to be, right? So in that sense, Uranus can be very undemocratic, stubborn, uncooperative. That's another one that we can connect with Uranus. And in fact, Uranus can be very much the significators of dictators. We think about Uranus as a freedom fighter, but actually fanaticism is one of the potentials for Uranus. It can be connected with dictators in that regard. Someone taking control and saying, hey, I've got a better idea of how the world should look like, except all of these other people shouldn't be here right now. So then we just get rid of them, right? And we're seeing this in history again and again. And I think this does have a connection to Uranus, the sense of the ideal reality, right? We think about the myth and the children and all the earthy things being ejected and rejected and etc. Well, there is this sense of the collective mind and this ideal of what it should be and what it should look like in someone's perspective, not in everyone's perspective. So this is when we really need the sun to balance it out, this, right? I gave a talk about the Handmaid's Tale, so the astrology of the Handmaid's Tale, a couple of years ago or 3 years ago at the Astrological Association, and what came up again and again and again was a powerful Uranus. And in fact, Uranus in Taurus is a very powerful significator of that novel. So we can think about Uranus in Taurus and the Handmaid's Tale as well, and the darker side of it, okay? But just to get the idea, they were going back to organic, and there is a dictatorship, and, an attempt of control, the infertility, the challenges that kind of sound Taurian there, because Taurus is a sign of fertility. But also, there's a phrase there that I thought was very like Uranian, is like, we can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. That's a very, and that's what happened with the French Revolution as well. There's just a complete bloodbath. It started with beautiful ideals and ended up being complete chaos. And they just shifted the power back to a dictator, Napoleon, that came afterwards. So there is something of that as a shadow side of Uranus there. And I like to think about the shadows because, again, in the astrological world, we tend to idealize Uranus a lot, idealize Aquarius a lot as well. So So Uranus, so that's one side here of Uranus that we're thinking about. So another thing is where we are different. So whatever Uranus is in our chart is where we're different. So it will be our psychologically, physically, or life choices as well. It doesn't matter. So if you have Uranus in the second house, will be how you make your money. So you haven't really, you're not equipped. Usually you're not equipped to follow the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 sort of scenario. You really need to have freedom and flexibility, right? So my brother has Uranus in the second, and he is a film director, so he's got very different schedule basically than most people. My partner is a freelancer designer, and he has Uranus in the second house, so he's freelancer. I think the Uranus in the second would be reflecting of a freelancer, someone that needs to make their money in their own way. And in the first house would be how they look. I have Uranus in the first. I got this gray silver streak, which is natural, by the way. And I do think that it does have something to do with my Uranus and how I look different from most. I mean, that started when I was in my early 20s, like 18, 19 years old. So it's not really because I'm getting old, although I am getting old. So it has to do with deviation. So choosing a different path, doing something differently, right? Uranus is also connected with the sense of rejection, as I said, alienation, castration. That's Uranus as well. Removing something, cutting something off. That's Uranus. And especially if you have Mars involved in the equation as well, there's a sense of cutting, chopping something off. We often think about Uranus and the moon in the chart, for example, as someone that tends to cut off emotions, to dissociate from them, to get a distance from them. On a good side, they're quite capable of talking about emotions and not just acting out emotions. But on the shadow side, they can be very disengaged from their emotions. So remembering that astrology will always have the worst, the best, and all the colors in between, okay? And we really try to think, okay, right, I have Uranus in a certain place. How can I use this in a way that will really feed my dreams and my bigger self, right? Myself with a capital S. Where would I rather be in my life? And how can these aid my potential, my, the life that I want to live? Okay, so Uranus is connected to revolution, revolting as well. So usually this is Sue Tompkins saying, usually there is something that's revolting before revolution takes place. So, people can't take it, people can't embrace it. And so there is a revolution that happens. A sense of shock, like I said, when the electricity was discovered, and shock is connected with Uranus. Exile and deportation is another one I thought was very cool and thought-provoking that Sue Thompson, I'm stopping saying interesting all the time. Anyways, I thought it was very thought-provoking that Sue Tompkins says that she sees Australia as a significator of Uranus for various reasons. Historical reasons of all of the Irish and British people that went to Australia to populate Australia, so they were all in exile. And obviously also the native population that got rejected from their own land. But also how people live on the outsides of Australia and the outback. Now that's an interesting, again, I fell into the interesting game, but that's a really cool imagery. I mean, the outback is actually the center. It's nothing to do with the out or the back. And the outback, which is the center of the country, is not really where the majority of the population is. So I thought that was quite cool, to think about, and a good image, again, a good interesting imagery to have when we think about Uranus. Yeah, you see, astrology is symbolic thinking, and the more you can think symbolically, the more you can practice thinking symbolically. Look around your room. What is Uranian about it? Where is Uranus in your chart? How do you see that manifesting in your life, on the small, the medium, the big things as well, right? So freedom will be also connected with Uranus. Liberation, rebellion. Uranus will challenge, and this is a great tip here when we're thinking about Uranus transits, okay? Uranus transiting a certain house. So It challenges anything that's a stuck, sterile, predictable, authorities, traditions, the status quo as well. All of that will be challenged by Uranus. So when we're having a Uranus transit to our moon, our emotional life, how we do emotions, how we express emotions will be challenged. When we're having Uranus transit to our sun, there's a sense of awakening, which is another Uranian thing, but in our self-expression, how can we express ourselves more authentically? How can we open the space? How can we get rid of what's being stuck and sterile, right? And too predictable that we're just bored with. This is another great tip. When we're having a Uranus transit, think about everything that's boring now. It's like you've had enough. You're just so bored of it. It's like, oh, I need a change. It's a stagnant. So then Uranus comes in and creates the change, the rebellion, the freedom, the liberation. All right. Uranus will also be the significator of split ups, breaks, disruption, relationship breaks of your bones, family breaks as well. And in that sense, there's also significator of explosions. So sudden explosions, lightning flashes as well. Flashing somebody is very Uranian as well. It just shows something nobody's expecting. This is unexpected, right? But a thing that the Sue Tompkins says that I think is very accurate is the Uranus stands for break of rhythm. So any break of rhythm will have a connection with Uranus. So the rhythm is going a certain way, and then Uranus change the pace, have break the cycle, break the something gets So she said in terms of health, it could be connected with spasms, cramps, convulsions, sudden accidents as well. Accidents is like sudden and is a shock as well, and that those two are very much connected with Uranus too. When we think about explosions with Uranus, we can think about Chernobyl as well, which I think is a great significator for Uranus. And when Chernobyl happened in the 80s, so the explosion of the power plant in Ukraine, or the Soviet Union at the time, the Ascendant was a 22 Sagittarius, and Uranus was a 22 Sagittarius. So the Ascendant, how that event came out into the world, was very explosive, and it had this enormous effect and consequence as well. And I think about enormous and exaggeration is Sagittarius, right? So that I thought was interesting. And if you haven't seen a series of Chernobyl series and you're interested in this type of stuff, I really recommend. It's very, very good. So that is one thread here of my mind map. Now, the urge for independence, which will be connected with freedom. So the urge for independence, autonomy, rejecting others as well, being very sensitive to rejection. That's the thing that people don't talk so much when it comes to Uranus and Uranian people, but they're highly, highly sensitive to being rejected. So they reject first. Rather than being rejected, I would just reject first, right? There is that kind of movement there as well. Uranus will also reflect originality, experimentality, and a thinker, experimental thinker. Again, the sense of awakening is connected with Uranus, and Uranus usually brings awakening to whatever it touches by transit, to whatever house is traveling as well. A sense of awakening, a revolution that's happening in that house, and a sudden insights, very, very much a manifestation of a Uranus transit, especially a Uranus transit to your personal planets. Yeah. Sudden insights, especially if it's your Mercury involved, because that's how you think, that's how you communicate, that's your thought process. Now, one of my favorite things that I left last year in the mind map is also Sue Tompkins, who said, and I saw one of her talks actually when she was sharing that, and I really thought that was extremely insightful, which is Uranus will rule every prefix un. So the prefix un, so the words with the prefix un, is ruled by Uranus, because that reverses the meaning of the word. Now, everything that reverses, that's contrary, is Uranus. So unusual, unconventional, unexpected, unpredictable, uncooperative, those words are very, very much connected and related to the Uranian archetype and what we understand of Uranus, but also anti. So anti something, because again, it also reverses the meaning of that word. And IR, so irregular. Again, that's also another prefix that turns the meaning upside down, that changes, that reverses the meaning of something. So this is what I had to say. This is my mind map of Uranus and potential Uranus significators here. Let me know if you have any addition to it, or if you connect and feel a sense of resonance with a lot of them, and where is your Uranus. But again, by all means, I haven't stressed all the potentials and everything, because astrology can be quite infinite if we really give ourselves the time and the space to imagine. When we engage our imagination with something, we can think about so many different things. But I really feel that encapsulates a very important expression of what Uranus is astrologically. Now let's make a move into Uranus in Taurus. And Taurus itself will be talking about self-sufficiency, accumulating material resources, and our resources as well in general. And to think of our resources, we think of our self-esteem, because if we have something, we have a currency, we have something that we can exchange that's valuable, then we feel valuable ourselves. So self-esteem is also connected there. Material security, material indulgence is a Taurian thing. And everything that's concrete, tangible, practical, Taurus. Personal power will be Taurus, becoming our own person, self-possessing. I like to think, when I think about Taurus as well, we possess ourselves, we don't possess others. Anything to do with our desires and the will to satisfy our desires, the impulse to satisfy our desires, that's Taurus as well. And the development of our resources as well, and making a living, as I kind of mentioned it before. So when I put the two together, so when I think about Uranus and Taurus, themes are connected with economic changes, change of the values. So then we think about the collective, right? And where Uranus is right now. So the change of values, changes in material security or senses of material security or insecurity. Possessions, again, how we deal with possessions, how much do we possess, how much are we capable of possessing or not. Nature will definitely be there. And I think when I did this talk about the Handmaid's Tale, you know, one of the big things was climate in that novel. And that's one of the reasons why everything went wrong. The lack of fertility and the fact that most foods were poisonous because of pollution. So climate and nature is a big one connected with Taurus as well. Cryptocurrency, as we've been seeing the rise of cryptocurrency, I definitely attribute that to Uranus and Taurus. I once saw a video about meat that was being grown in a lab. That's very Uranus in Taurus. Like this sense of the Uranus lab technology, artificially created, and food. So foods that are being artificially created, and our relation to growing food in general as well. I think that's a Uranus and Taurus thing. And diets, I think that's also such a big one with Uranus and Taurus. The amount of different diets that we have available, the ones that are also very connected with ideals, fighting for something, for the animals, for the well-being of animals, and etc. That's Uranus in Taurus as well, I feel. This sense of rebellion. The last time Uranus was in Taurus, that was in between the wars, in between the Great Wars. It was in the 30s. Margaret Atwood, in fact, had Uranus in Taurus, and she wrote that novel, The Handmaid's Tale. But around that time, it was just the time when the resources became scarce and people had to learn how to find security that wasn't necessarily material. and their values also shifted tremendously during that time. So yeah, in 2026, we're going to have Uranus moving to Gemini. And I think then the communication will become very fast-paced, and it's hard to imagine how this is going to be, because we're already in such a fast-paced world. I can't imagine how much more faster we can go. We're just going to like think about it. We're going to send thought vibrations to each other. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, this is what I wanted to say. And I know we only have 3 years, but I started my channel a lot later than when Uranus moved it to Taurus. So that's the time to do it. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to take an action. So let's make the most of these next 3 years of Uranus in Taurus, right? So this is what I had to say about Uranus in Taurus and the Taurian archetype as well. Now, with what's being said about the cycles, with what's being said about the mind map as well, and the potentials, interpretations, astrological interpretations of Uranus as a principle, and the Taurian element, how do we bring all of this into our personal experience? That's the 5th part of this video, and that's where we headed to. Now, before I share my screen, because I'm going to share my screen and show you the ascendants and where Uranus is placed in the houses, I really want to make it clear, because there's a lot of confusion that I find that people are sharing with me in the comments about where the planet is in relation to the ascendant. So first, you need to set your heart into a house system. Decide what house system you want to use. Get, if you don't have a software, get astro.com, create your chart. There are many different house systems there that you can choose from. Do a little research, find a little video about house systems and how they're created and what the difference between them, so you can set your heart into one. So I'm not here to tell you which one is the best, which one is the worst, but I do use equal house systems when I'm doing these videos. I find them easy, and I know the whole house system would be even easier, because every house would start at 0, but I don't like to start the chart at 0 degrees of whatever sign is. I believe that each degree of the zodiac is important, and that's my personal belief. So if my rising is at 20 Taurus, it's not a 0 Taurus, it's 20 Taurus. That's where is the beginning of my chart. So I kind of like to stay with that. So all of that to say that you might be seeing astrologers saying things different, or and that's okay. You just need to go with your gut and your intuition in terms of what house makes sense to you, and also find out what degree is your ascendant. So if you decide that whole house system isn't for you, that you actually rather have Placidus or Koch or Equal or any other that considers the degrees, then find out what degree, and then it will be a lot easier for you to use the videos I'm creating. All right, so this is my little disclaimer, my little clarification about where the planets and the houses, why are they so different between astrologers. So let's make a move into the meaty bit, really, and the one that I believe you're very interested. So here we are with the chart, and again, I just kept Uranus in the chart. I mean, I have some midpoint because I always forget to take it off, but ignore that point. We're talking about Uranus. This is the symbol, the glyph for Uranus, and as per, I like to start with Aries rising. And again, because Uranus has been in Taurus for a while, it hasn't just started. Uranus is already at 20 degrees Taurus, so it's like 10 more degrees and it will move into Gemini in 3 years. So it will be in different houses depending on your degree. So if you consider an astrological zodiacal degree or a house system, an astrological house system that considers the zodiacal degrees, then you'll see that will be different. There will be a difference here. We can have 2 houses again. So Aries rising, and that's basically thinking about decans. Think about decans of the zodiac signs. So we've got 10 degrees, 10 degrees, and 10 degrees. That's the first, second, and third decan. And usually people know about that because they know that when they have their birthdays late in the season, they know they're the third decan of a sign. All right. So the third decan of Aries will have Uranus in the first house. All the first and the second decans of Aries rising will have Uranus in a second. Okay, so I'm gonna go with Uranus in a second, and if you have in the first, you can watch the other video or the other bit of the video where I'm talking about Uranus in the first. All right, so the first and second decans of Aries rising will be having Uranus in the second house. Now, Uranus traveling through your second house, the revolution, the change, the big awakening that you might be experiencing will be connected with your values, will be reflective of a change on how you make money, of your relationship with money itself as well. How you exchange your resources for value. How do you do that exchange? This is all reflected or placed in the second house there, right? With Uranus transiting that second house. Eventually, that Uranus may be transiting planets that you have in the 10th by a trine, and this could definitely be you setting sails in terms of your career and moving forward, fast forwarding your development there. But it could be opportunities to doing things differently. It could be like a dramatic loss of things, with Uranus in a second, that then brings that sense of awakening that you actually don't need that much, that those things may have been, holding you back previously. So really important to see if you have anything natally that's being transited by that Uranus. If that Uranus is on your sun in Taurus, then it would definitely have even more significance. If it's a square your sun in Leo, if it's a square or if it's an opposition to your sun in Scorpio, all of this would definitely give us even more clues about that. But that Uranus in the second will be the revolution, the sense of the search for independence and autonomy in the house of resources, in the house of money, in the house of values, in your body as well, how you deal with your body. So it could be a revolution when it comes to self-worth as well, and building a sense of self-worth. A sense of rebellion in your job could be there as well. Job as in like how you're making your money. If it's not aligned with your values, if you feel like you're being stuck, it's being too predictable, it's being too, that's that Uranus transiting your second house there, showing you that there can be new ways to do it, that it is possible to find new ways, to find another manifestation, or another, not manifestation, but another expression, another way of expressing that need for security, basically, with that Uranus in the second house. All right, so this is for the first and the second decan of Aries. Now, if I move into Taurus, and again, for the first and the second decan, and I like to put the minutes here so we can see. So you just pay attention to the numbers here and the degrees of the ascendant. So if I go to the earliest degrees of Taurus, Uranus goes even further into your first house. So the first and the second decan, it means from 10 to 20 degrees Taurus rising, you have Uranus in the first house. Okay, so Uranus in the first house, and if from 20 to 30 will be in your 12, basically. It would still be coming to your first house, and then you can watch the video where Uranus is transiting to 12. So with Uranus transiting the first house, there is all about who you are and all the things that have been holding you back, that have been all the commitments that you've made potentially to a partner in a partnership that you don't feel like you want to keep doing it, that somehow is kind of holding you hostage. This is reflective of a Uranus transiting on your first house. Finding a space to be yourself, to be focused and expressive of your identity and your will as well. What is your will? What is it that you want to do? if you think about the duality of the first and the seventh, you know, the seventh house is everything that other people want and expects from me. And how do I cooperate and commit to that and do that with them, invite them into my decisions? Uranus transiting your ascendant as well as your first, you just probably will feel very uncommittal, potentially. You're just going to feel just tired of it. Just tired of committing, just tired of taking responsibility for a partner, if that's something you've been doing. Tired of sacrificing your wants, your wishes. There might be a sense of, actually, if I was single, this would be so much easier. That could be a feeling like that. But I often find with my clients as well, when they come to see me, that Uranus, when Uranus is transiting a hot spot in your chart, and especially planets that are connected with relationships, one-to-one relationships, it doesn't mean you have to break up. It doesn't mean it has to be the end. It only means that you need more space. You need more space within that relationship. And also, if you remember from the mind map that I shared, Uranus will turn things upside down. So if you've been very individualistic this whole time and you can't commit and you can't do any of that, then Uranus will shift that tendency. It will turn upside down the tendencies that you've had so far, that you've been so enthralled in it, and you're just doing it again and again, and you're sort of in that sort of stuck in that pattern there. That's the status quo of your life. Uranus will challenge that. So the transit of Uranus will challenge your status quo. So if you've been single all of this time, it will change that status quo. It won't like make you even more uncommittal, okay? And this is why we need to be very personal when we're interpreting a transit. We need to really look at the chart in great detail. So Uranus in the first is everything that has to do with your image as well. You might want a new hairstyle. You may want a new sort of, how do you dress, new colors, new, you might be embracing something new in connection to your sense of identity. I think this is the main point here. All right. So Uranus in the first, second decan of Gemini, as well as the last decan of Taurus, like I said, yeah. Then Uranus is in the 12th house, and this could be a great time where you can separate from many of the family dynamics. You sort of, again, when we have transits in the 12th, we're preparing the ground for when it comes to our ascendant, when it really becomes conscious. So we're doing a lot of work in our unconscious. And I think, again, think about Uranus as a rebellion, as a revolution, as a big sort of sudden change. And it could be anything that's being stuck in your unconscious there, that Uranus is sort of shifting and changing. Because Uranus rules electricity as well and shock. Sometimes when we have a very strong Uranus transit to a personal planet, we might feel electrified ourselves, like, a sense of being electrified. And if you have planets in the 12, this could be the case with Uranus there. So it's really important to find an outer expression of this. How can you put that into life? The 12th house is the house of spiritual practices as well. So it's a great time to kind of get in touch with otherworldly things, but in a grounded manner. We're talking about Taurus. And again, because Uranus in Taurus is a rebellion, a revolution on our values as well, what we value that's connected with that house. How do you value yourself in the first house? How do you value spirituality? And what are your values when it comes to your relationship to the collective unconscious? And how can we shift what's being stagnant in there? Again, I think because I'm highly Uranian myself, I tend to welcome Uranian changes and this sense of growth and progress that's connected with Uranus, this shift, this moving on to something that's more authentic, the ability to let something go because it really doesn't resonate with your authentic self anymore. And when it reaches your ascendant in a few years' time, then there is a sense of being very much more aware and conscious of what's been going on in those last few years, right? It's a big clearing up somehow. a more original connection, a more original place in your unconscious there with that Uranus in the 12th house. Now, for the last decade of Gemini, and by last decade, I mean from 20 degrees to 29 degrees, then Uranus will be in the 11th. And also the first and the second decade of Cancer. So again, if I move, and I'm moving, you keep an eye on the numbers here. Look, 26, 27, 28, 29, boom, Cancer. So from 0 until the 20th degree of Cancer, we have Uranus in the 11th house. Now that's, again, a revolution, a rebellion, an urge for independence and autonomy in the house of friends. It could be finding friends that are very outside the box, people that are very different, and their life choices are different. They're psychologically very different. But it's a sense of rebellion that's happening in your 11th house in terms of what you value when it comes to like-mindedness. How do you share vision with a group of people? So you might be shifting friends at this point, because you need people that share a belief in common with you, a hope for the future, which is another interpretation of the 11th house. But there is a break in the rhythm of the 11th house for you, Cancer rising, with Uranus transitioning that house for you. All right. So important to give space for it and to see what happens there. But it could definitely be you tapping into the collective ideas of the climate change and the things that need to change in our society, and getting together with people that can also help you make that change. You know, it's a time of like changing the world, making the world a better place. That Uranus in the 11th. The progress that we can all share as the human family is the 11th house. So what your role in there is, and how the changes that in your personal life are happening now are like a potential for what you can share collectively as well. Which is the same case if we move, so from Cancer to Leo, and obviously from 20 to 29 in Cancer, you have Uranus in the 10th house, but Leo rising from 0 to 20 Leo degrees on the ascendant, you have Uranus in the 10th house. And that's your role collectively. That's your vocation. That is one of the angular houses, is very important. When we have a transiting planet in one of these houses, we feel it very powerfully. And Uranus in the 10th is talking about your career, your vocation, your role as a mother, your mother as a person as well. All of your parental interjections that you sort of are ready to let go of, to rebel against it, your urge for independence and autonomy in that regard, in that area of life, Leo rising. You know, what are you playing? What sort of role you're playing out there in the world that feels stagnant, predictable, sterile, that you're sort of ready to change, to turn into something new, is very much a reflection of that Uranus transiting your 10th house. Remembering that if that's picking up any of your personal planets, that's going to be even more powerful. The urge to rebel, to change, to be original, the sort of unpredictable movements in that house, in the house of career and social role, your vocation, your reputation as well. It could definitely be connected with a change of careers there. Definitely. And if you have a ascendant at 20 Leo, that Uranus is square to your ascendant. And the troubles in your career could be challenging your relationships and how you do your relationships as well. they could be interconnected. Uranus going over your midheaven as well, big time. If you have your midheaven at 20 Taurus and Uranus is hovering about on your midheaven there, big time of a new chapter, an entire new chapter in terms of vocation, in terms of who you can be in the world, and a big sense of I need to do something else. This is really stagnant. I can't just keep on with this status quo. All right. And that will potentially be the Leo rising there with the Taurus midheaven. All right. Get to know your chart, explore your chart, because there's no formula that will suit everyone, you know. The 20 to 29th Leo will have Uranus in the 9, as well as the early Virgo until 20 degrees Virgo. So Uranus in the 9th could be massive expansions in terms of studying, in terms of expanding your mind to a world perspective that's connected with learning something new, a sense of growth and expansion that's reflected in that 9th house. So whatever is being stuck in that house, stuck, sterile, predictable, the status quo, that you don't feel you have enough independency, enough autonomy, enough space to be original. It could be awakening, it could be a spiritual awakening, a new way of relating to the world based in new beliefs, new meanings, your values in connection to the meanings that you attribute. Is Uranus in the 9th. And because we have Jupiter in Taurus as well, Jupiter will be joining in the party very soon, if it hasn't yet, in terms of the house there. And again, there's an emphasis there and doing something that will expand you, going for that course you wanted to do, going to travel, being abroad, relating to people from other places, and really challenging the old values in that area of your life. There is an opportunity there for awakening. Uranus really brings an opportunity for awakening. So that's definitely reflected in that Uranus in the 9th. An unconventional belief, separating from the family belief, you know, what if your family took you to church every time, you know, this is the time when you're really breaking free from that. If that kind of religion that you were born into doesn't speak to you, you sort of finding your own religion, right? Now, if you're 20 to 29 degrees Virgo, you have Uranus in the 8th, as well as moving minutes, as well as the early Libra rising. So Libra from 0 to 20 has that Uranus in the 8th house there. And we're talking about psychology. Whenever I think about the 8th house, I think about the depth, you know, the stuff that was really deep down below, under the surface. And so Uranus could be very turning every rock in there, bringing a lot of unexpected events or unpredictable. It could be an unpredictable lump sum that comes to you from someone's death. So an inheritance, something that changes your situation completely, something that gives you a lot more freedom and space. Excuse me. It could be more symbolic. It could be like a separation in the family. It could be breaking free from a dynamic. When I think about the water houses, I think about family dynamics. I think about that unity that we are, the family psyche that we sort of came from, the family pool, the family myth. And so is an urge to separate from there further, to find your own values. It could be you getting more involved with witchcraft, with the occult, and how this is expanding as well your mind, showing you new values, waking you up to a new reality through the 8th house, through astrology, through rituals, through, could be that. It could be intimacy, a big wake up in terms of your sexual life and your sensuality and how you dive into intimacy or not. And a big change of rhythm there in that area of your life. Different choices in that area of your life. But it's everything that has to do with the depth, with things that are under the surface, subjects that are under the surface. It could be the therapy that you've been doing that's really like bringing you a lot of more space and challenging everything that's stuck, that's predictable, that became boring in the psyche. Yeah. So if we move on from 20 to 29 Libra ascendant, but also the early Scorpio ascendant from 0 to 20 Scorpio ascendant, we're having Uranus in the 7th. And in fact, if you have a 20 degrees ascendant in Scorpio, then Uranus is right there opposition your ascendant right now. And that's a big time. That's definitely something there to do with relationships, so how you relate with people that you relate, new people coming into your life, Uranian types of people coming into your life, a complete revolution in relationship dynamics, partnership dynamics. So again, if you're the lone wolf, then that Uranus will bring you a more stable relationship, something that you've never done before. If you've been jumping from one relationship to another, you might spend some time alone and meet exciting people that will show you something about yourself and move on. That's something interesting, isn't it? It's like other people introduce you to yourself whilst you're relating. And I think Uranus has a connection with the urge to individuate, to kind of get into that differentness, making those different choices and being a different person. So where is it in the house of relationships, in the one-to-one partnerships, that you can be different, that you've never imagined yourself capable of? With the Scorpio rising, for example, you could be finding more peace in relationships. You're being always all or nothing. Oh my God, everything is drama, is blah, intense. And then suddenly you find someone that's very grounded, very patient, very slow moving. And you kind of like, wow, that is a revolution. It doesn't sound as the typical revolution that we'd imagine, because we think about Uranus, we think about divorce, right? There's a lot of like cookbooks in astrology that will say, oh, it's a divorce, but it doesn't, it could be a union. It could be a new relationship, new committed relationship. It could be a new step in your relationship. I have had clients who almost got divorced during a Uranus transit like this. But what happened was that they found a way of giving more space to each other, or they had a break in the relationship. And Uranus is the significator of breaks, the break of a rhythm. So there is a break of rhythm there in your 7th house, in the house of relationship, in a specific relationship, or in how you do relationships. But every codependency will be challenged with Uranus in the 7th. Uranus in the 1st as well. Uranus doesn't want any kind of codependency. It wants to find the independence, autonomy, and the original, thinking. So the split up and the breaks have a connection with that, really. So if we move to the late degrees Scorpio, so from 23 to 29 here, because otherwise we will be on your descendant already. And the early Sagittarius, so from 0 to 20 Sagittarius rising, you have Uranus in the 6th. And Uranus in the 6th is a big sort of revolution on your daily routines. finding what's important to you in a daily routines, breaking free from old ways of behaving on your daily life, new diets, new exercises. It could be like shocks in terms of your health as well, and how you deal with that. How do you embrace the change? How do you embrace change in your daily rituals? Right? As a Virgo house, the 6th house is your daily job, where there might be a rebellion, where things might feel stuck, sterile, predictable. The status quo won't do anymore. You need to find a new way to work, new co-workers, with Uranus in the 6th as well, new values in relationship to the daily job as well, with Uranus in the 6th. We need to break free there. We need to have new ideas. We need to break the rhythm. And if we know that Uranus is somewhere transitioning something in our charts, we know that we need to break the rhythm there. That's where we need to break the rhythm. And how can you do that in your 6th house? In your house of daily organization. Yeah. Getting a new pet. Uranus in the 6th. It will bring a sense of awakening or something. I mean, it might not bring you a sense of freedom. You need to find more freedom. Where Uranus is, you need to find more freedom in your life. And how do you do that? According to your situation right now, Sagittarius rising. Late degrees, the Scorpio rising. How do you do that? So if we move on to the late degrees of Sagittarius and the early degrees of Capricorn, we have Uranus in the 5th house. So that will be 0 to 20 degrees Capricorn. We'll have that Uranus already in the 5th. And that could be a revolution on your relationship to your kids. It could be you having kids. I mean, having kids don't necessarily bring you a sense of freedom. So there could be a struggle. Like, you want to self-express more. You want to have more space to be creative. Or you could be fulfilled being creative with the child, right? Because it's the ultimate creation, right? One could argue, having a baby. It could be sudden pregnancies, shocks in relation to pregnancies. But that's where we need to be original, experimental, is in our creative area, in our creative life. How are you doing your self-expression there, Capricorn rising? That Uranus will really be reclaiming that from you, be really asking you to do that, to break the rhythm, to make different choices, get a new hobby, do something new, you know? Change your relationship with your child, give more space to your child. It might be your child becoming rebellious. And that might be a way of life to show you that you need to be more individual. You need to let them go. You need to let them be themselves. Right? There are so many dimensions. You see how I'm showing you, but there are so many different dimensions to how you can experience this Uranus in your 5th. But you definitely need more space and freedom to express, to be creative. Okay? Now, from 20 to 29 degrees, from 20 to 29 degrees Capricorn, as well as 0 to 20 Aquarius, we have Uranus in the 4th house. Uranus in the 4th house, again, is a water house. We're talking about break from the family pool, the family sort of myth. You're having an opportunity to really emerge as an individual. That Uranus is asking you to be more of an individual, to get out of that enmeshment, that like lack of boundaries, that sort of like being too glued into your family. Now, Aquarius rising, if you haven't had a family, then it might be you having a family. and like having a complete new relationship to family and the family life and all of that. If you've never settled down anywhere, it might be you settling. That might be Uranus. Or if you have been fairly settled, that Uranus in the fourth is like, right, you need to find a new home. It's time for you to find a new home, a new way. This feels stuck, predictable, sterile, is not really enabling you to grow and to expand, and not as much. So it's time to move on. Find an unconventional house, an unexpected home, something unexpected within the family unit as well. Shocking news in the family. But really, it's about you finding new ways of putting your roots down. If your roots are rotten because you haven't moved enough, or if your roots are too short because you haven't put down enough, this is the time for you to change that. What are your values when it comes to home and having a home? Where is home for you? How can you be more individual in your home life? Right? Now, the late degrees Aquarius and the early to mid degrees Pisces, we have Uranus in the third house. So Uranus in the third house will be talking about new ideas. I mean, we think about Uranus as a collective mind. And in the third house, which is how your mind works, is the house of your mind, is the house of new ideas, of how you communicate, is the house of communication. So then we have almost a double whammy there. The transit of Uranus in the house of how to think, or how you think, how you communicate. So it could be lightning bolt insights, a real shock when it comes to how you communicate or to how you think, a revolution in the words that you choose and how you've expressed them. You could start writing more. You could be doing a new course as well to express that Uranus in the third house, a thirst for new knowledge, something new for you to learn, to express yourself, a new neighborhood, a different set around you, because the third house is also our neighborhood and how we deal with neighbors. So a different, unusual neighborhood or unusual neighbors that might kind of inflict us with new ideas, break the rhythm somehow. But think about all the stagnant ways that you communicated in the past, and this is the time for you to learn new ways, to value new ways, or to embrace your values when it comes to voicing up, finding your voice. I love that. Finding your voice with that Uranus, a voice that's for your independence, for your autonomy, right? Are you aligned with that voice? Singing lessons, lessons in general, courses, book clubs, books in general as well. Siblings, could be a sibling as well. A different relationship with a sibling. A new sibling being born out of the blue. Something about communication that needs to be leveled up in at service of your freedom, of your autonomy, right? Writing a blog, expressing your values, right? Now, for the late degrees Pisces, so between 20 and 29 Pisces, Uranus is still in the second house. And from the early to the mid Aries year. So from the early degrees of Aries and the late degrees of Pisces, we'd have Uranus in the second house. So Uranus in the second house, I just said in the beginning of the video, right? Everything that has to do with values, values, money, etc. is all there. So that's it. Let me know how, if you feel anything, if you'd like to share anything about Uranus. I'll be very interested in hearing, and I hope you make the most of your Uranus transit, and I'll see you on Friday.